What's going on, guys? So in this video, I want to talk to you about my thoughts on a timeless classic 90s fragrance that is well beloved by a lot of guys my age, a little bit older than me, and even a little bit younger than me. I'm 37 at the recording of this video. So anywhere from your early 30s to your early 40s, you probably, at the minimum, had a friend that used to wear this all the time. We're talking about Ralph Lauren Polo Sport. Is it still worth buying today here in 2022 with all the talk of reformulation and it not being what it used to be? I want to talk about it with you guys, so stay tuned. So as far as this scent is concerned, I've been wearing this over the last couple of days. I've been wearing it during the day, wearing it out the shower, have a fresh spray on my hand. So as with a lot of 90s fragrances, there's a ton of different notes which I'll have on screen for you guys. What it really comes down to is the aldehydes do play a part. It's very bright. You're going to get a lot of this mouth-watering citrus feel, but there's also a nice mild, fresh green and minty tone. That's the main thing that you're going to get. This gets associated with Polo Blue Sport as well because of the citrus and the mint note, because they do have similar style openings, though they do dry down a little bit differently. This has more of a woody backdrop and becomes more of a herbal green fragrance overall. And even though they both say sport, like this says sport, I don't get sporty fragrance vibes. What do I mean by that? So typically it's more fresh, airy, light citrus than it is greens and woods for me when it comes to sport fragrances. Now, when it comes to the 90s, it is a product of its time. Sure, it was a sporty fragrance back in the 90s. As far as where we are here in the 2020s, like I said, I think more citrus dominant without all the fresh mintiness and greens and dense woods of what this fragrance has to offer. I believe it's a ginger note that provides that fresh, spicy feel. And I even think that's what's creating this light, creamy tone as it starts to settle in from the top note into the heart of the fragrance. And that kind of hangs around for a while before the woods kind of really take over the dry down. Like I said, there's a ton of different notes. It's not the easiest fragrance to discern a bunch of different things outside of a citrus smell, some fresh greens, a little bit of green, fresh spice. It's a little creamy, and the mintiness you will definitely be able to pick out in the top. This does smell like quintessential 90s. Like I said, most guys in my age group have either had this at one point in their life or had a close friend of theirs at one point that this is what he wore all the time. So it's one of the aromas of the 90s for sure, and it's a timeless classic scent profile to me personally because of it. Now, I haven't smelled older bottles in a really long time, so I can't compare this to the old one. It does remind me of what I think of when I smell Polo Sport, so don't let the reformulation talk scare you away, because this fragrance is really cheap these days. This 75 ml, I paid 30 some odd dollars for it, if I remember correctly. It's not expensive to get your hands on, and if you're the nostalgic type and are very fond of things from the 90s, as am I, this is one of the aromas of the 90s. This will take you back when you smell it. So I say get a sample and try it, or hell, if you've had it before and you just want to take a trip down memory lane, roll the dice. It's 30 to 40 bucks will get you a 75 ml like this. I think the smell is perfectly fine, even here today in 2022. Now, when it comes to longevity, this is where it gets the knock from what it used to be. Yes, fragrances were eau de toilette fragrances were definitely stronger in the 90s and early 2000s. I can agree with that. I'm not going to sit here and say it performs exactly like it used to. I don't recall what kind of performance I used to get on it. I mean, it's been a long time since I never even had a bottle. I had a travel size. So I want to say it was like 7.5 ml. So I don't know. It's been so long. I mean, we're talking over 20 years here, back when I was a kid. So it's one of those fragrances where today I get about 5 to 6 hours of life on my skin. For the scent profile, I think that's totally fine. I don't need 8 to 10 hours out of this. Now, would I complain if I had 8 to 10 hours of longevity? No, absolutely not. And from what most say, that's what it used to be. And so apparently that's what it used to be. But 5 to 6 hours for a bright, fresh, minty green fragrance that you can get around 30 or 40 bucks, I don't think that's a bad longevity for it, honestly. The sillage and projection's bright in the first like 45 minutes to an hour. It's a very bright and loud projection, very airy scent, but after about an hour and a half it does start to sit a bit close to the skin. The sillage isn't monstrous or anything like that. It's in the more moderate to mild range where it's detectable. You may get light whiffs randomly throughout the life of the fragrance on your skin, but I don't see this one as having some dense trail. I judge that based off of how I get random whiffs of it. I don't seem to get any anosmia and olfactory fatigue from this fragrance that I can tell. So based on the information I'm giving, this is my personal experience with the fragrance. And it's, average performance across the board pretty much. It's an average performing fragrance at a, bargain price point for a nostalgia pick for kids of the 90s. I think, honestly, the performance really matches the scent profile. And like I said, I wouldn't hesitate if you're in my age group and want to walk down memory lane as far as aromas. Because, don't let the reformulation talk scare you away. Go into a fragrance for the scent profile. Because if you can get 5 to 6 hours on your skin like I've been getting, I think for this scent profile it's perfectly fine as long as you don't mind refreshing. Now, if you have to have something that goes 10 to 12 hours and that's the only things you're going to spend your money on, unless you put it on your skin, you won't know for sure if it's going to do that on your skin, but this may not be the fragrance for you then. Final thoughts on Polo Sport from Ralph Lauren, the quintessential fresh fragrance of the 90s. This is one of the most nostalgic fragrances from that decade for many, many guys my age, and I still think it's worth owning in this day and age. Yeah, it smells like the 90s, because I say that because I was a very young man in the 90s, and I remember things like this because I was into fragrances, even as a young man, as a kid, I really could appreciate fragrance for what it was. And this one, I think, even today, is still very good. I'm glad that I decided to go ahead and rebuy a bottle because it's been so many years since I had that travel size that I used to have. This is very good, in my opinion, still. I think this is a 7 out of 10 fragrance. Some may agree, some may disagree, some want to be stuck in the 90s and early 2000s and if I can't get a vintage bottle, I don't want it. Hey, that's your prerogative. I am totally fine with the translucent blue atomizer because I know that's the main way to tell if it's an old bottle or new bottle for a lot of guys. This is a newer bottle. Yes, this is one of those reformulated versions, and like I said, I still think it's a very good fragrance. I am completely content with the way it smells and the way it performs. Well, that's my thoughts and feelings on 90s in a bottle, Ralph Lauren Polo Sport. And until next time, do me a real quick favor. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. So I do appreciate all the feedback, and I love hearing from you guys. How many of you have one of the newer formulas? Are you totally fine with it like I am? How many of you are the type that like to gripe and complain about it's not what it used to be? That's totally fine, too. Everybody's right to their own opinion and how they feel about things. And this was just my opinion and how I feel about things. I think it's still worth visiting here in 2022. It doesn't come across as a dated smell to me, even though it does remind me of the 90s, because it is a product of the 90s. Doesn't mean it doesn't work here in the 2020s. And until next time, I will say, if you get your hands on Polo Sport from Ralph Lauren and you give it a spray now, you might end up thanking me later. Have a good one, guys.